Hi, my name is Morgana Evelyn, and I pioneered the concept of the Stealth Archer in Baldur's Gate 3 many years ago. Since early access, I've been researching, testing, refining, and perfecting not only the mechanical build, but also many of the gameplay elements that go into bringing this action-based style to a turn-based game. I would love to have you join me in this video if you want to benefit from my thousands of hours of playtesting and take the Stealth Archer into your own playthrough. I personally believe it is one of the strongest builds in the game, capable of soloing on a mode without even taking a single hit point worth of damage. It's strong enough to one-turn almost every available encounter, slowed down only briefly by the Shambling Mound, Merkel, and Cazador. I am not a speedrunner, but this build can clear the majority of legendary action bosses in 4.5 hours, which is useful for my researching and recording purposes. It is an incredibly unique playstyle, moving shadow to shadow and engaging your enemies unseen and undetected. Perfect for your Dark Urge run. You can achieve infinite attacks from the high ground, be completely untouched with greater invisibility, allowing you to assassinate anyone, or utilize darkness, allowing you to destroy almost every boss in the game with complete invulnerability. Let's address the elephant in the room. You do not need to attack out of combat if stealth shenanigans aren't your thing. It was a natural consequence of me pushing the stealth mechanic to its limit in BG3. My Stealth Archer is completely capable in turn-based mode, outputting over 2,200 damage turn 1. Oh but Evelyn, that's Act 3 damage. Trust me, it can 1 or 2 turn most enemies in Act 1 and Act 2. Let's go over some pros and cons of why you would want to play a Stealth Archer, starting with the pros. You have the strongest early game start of every class available, and you are online from level 3. You do not have to suffer until Act 3 for this build to work, and I'm a firm believer in Act 1 builds because that is the most difficult section of Honor mode. Your initiative is unmatched. With +3 from our subclass and much more from dexterity and gear, I truly believe initiative is king in Honor mode, and that +3 will save you from a trip back to the main menu when you eventually fail a dialogue check or make a mistake that lands you in combat. The damage is unreal. It is truly something you have to see to believe. You will 1 or 2 turn the majority of the enemies in the game. This is not an exaggeration, as I believe you can achieve 50 to 100 damage in Act 1, close to a 3-digit Nova in Act 2, and a 4-digit Nova in Act 3 if you follow my gearing. This build does not require long resting, perfect for your first solo or challenge run, maximizing temporary buffs for you to just steamroll through entire acts. The build has the toolkit to completely avoid damage, with Hide and Darkness equating to invulnerability if you use it correctly. You also have the mobility and optimization necessary to have infinite first turns, should you choose to take advantage of it. Hey, it's not all about glazing the build. Let's go over some cons. Charisma is neutral. Talking to people is not our strong point, but I prefer violence anyway. It is mechanically complex to master. To push this build to its limit, you have to learn a lot of hotkeys, mechanics, and timings, but I find that incredibly engaging. Don't worry if it seems overwhelming or intimidating. I will guide you through how to achieve my results. The piercing damage focus of this build is countered by certain enemies in Act 2 and 3, most notable being the Shambling Mound, Visible, and Merkel. However, I have a counter for those. Timestamps are placed in the video for your convenience, perfect as a quick reference as you're playing. Whatever you do, do not skip the how to Stealth Archer section, as it will blow your mind. With that being said, let's get into the first section of the build. The character creation. Our build is so strong that origin really doesn't matter. However, my personal preference is Dark Urge, mostly for one powerful unique item you get from its storyline, and the theme fits this build perfectly. Meet Mummy Milkers. She is a human, but other considerations that might interest you for race would be Duaga for the enlarge and free invisibility, Wood Elf for proficiency in stealth checks and 1.5 meters increased move speed, and yes, I read you hundreds of halfling comments.
Hello, darling. Don't be shy.
You can play as a Lightfoot halfling for rerolls and ones and advantage on stealth checks, but seriously, given the amount of damage you do and the techniques I'll show you that don't rely on stealth checks, your race does not matter. Before we move on to leveling, I want to make a quick mention about Astarion. This build suits his story and playstyle perfectly, and the 1d10 extra necrotic damage is incredible if you're willing to wait until a certain Act 3 quest. For class, we're going to pick Ranger. For favorite enemy, me, I prefer Ranger Knight. The heavy armor proficiency provides a lot of flexibility in gearing should you find you need it. Generally, heavy armor does impose disadvantage on stealth checks, but with some techniques I'll show you, this downside is irrelevant. Another valid option is Keeper of the Veil, mostly for protection from evil and good, which changes the tide of battle during the Merkle fight. However, we can substitute the spell with a common scroll purchase. With Natural Explorer, I highly recommend Urban Tracker, the sleight of hand proficiency. Very useful for stealing lots of arrows and gold, which we'll need on our adventure. Another suggestion is Wasteland Wanderer, Fire, giving us resistance to fire damage because in this game there are a lot of sources of fire damage. Moving on to stats, working top to bottom. Strength is dumped to 8 to make room for other stats. Dexterity is our primary stat at 17. Dexterity does a lot of things and is personally my favorite stat. It affects our attack rolls with finesse and ranged weapons, our initiative roll, and AC bonus after armor. Dexterity saves are the most common saving throw in the game, and of course Dex affects stealth. Constitution is a modest 14. A high health pool isn't critical for this build, but a moderate health pool and a chance to succeed on con saving throws is a nice buffer against the game's random nature. Intelligence is dumped to 8 because the only fort we have is violence, and wisdom is our secondary stat at 16. It does help with our saving throw against hold person, but the main reason I have this stat is to pair it with the Diadem of Arcane Synergy for a +3 damage onto each weapon attack. Our final stat is Charisma, and we're going to leave it neutral at 10. For skill proficiencies, the core of our build is Stealth. The others aren't as impactful, but I generally do like shoving and throwing enemies, especially on a solo run, so I take Athletics. A few others I can recommend: Sleight of Hand for stealing, Persuasion, Deception, or Intimidation for the occasional dialogue. Stealth is necessary for the build, but everything else really depends on your party composition and style of playthrough, so you have a lot of freedom. Let's move on to leveling, shall we? At level 2, we're going to pick Archery, granting us a +2 bonus to ranged weapon attack rolls. Trust me, this makes a huge difference, especially in a solo run where a single miss could mean a trip back to the main menu. Here's a little math jump scare for you. Each +1 equates to an additional 5% chance to hit your enemy. So at level 2, our fighting style increases our hit chance by 10%, and our spell choices will be Enhanced Leap and Long Strider. Let me explain. Long Strider is simple. It gives you an additional 3 meters movement speed bonus and lasts until long rest. Cast it on yourself and each party member and forget about it until the next day. It is incredibly useful for positioning, having enough move speed to connect an attack or enough distance to take cover from an enemy or leave combat, and can make all the difference in a fight. Now for one of my favorite early game spells, Enhanced Leap. This spell triples your jump distance and lasts for 10 turns. I highly recommend having this active before any engagement. Enhanced Leap allows you to kite your enemies. Hero attack this red cap and jump quite the distance. I did this to force my opponent to use their action to dash to catch up to me instead of attacking. If your enemy has ranged attacks, I suggest being craftier by using cover to block their line of sight. You can also use Enhanced Leap to get high ground for bonuses to your attack roll. Out of combat, it's a nice quality of life enhancement. I get a lot of questions asking how I am able to cast this spell so many times. Both Enhanced Leap and Long Strider are ritual spells, meaning outside of combat, you can cast them without using a spell slot, so you can use them as many times as you want. Level 3 is where we get our subclass, and let me tell you, Gloomstalker is one of the most powerful subclasses I have used in BG3. The main feature is Dread Ambusher, giving us a +3 to initiative. You do not know how impactful this single bonus is for the entirety of the game, especially in Act 1. Mistakes happen, and if you do make one that lands you into battle, this initiative could save you a trip back to the main menu in honor mode. Let me equip you with some powerful knowledge that a lot of challenge runners use for BG3, the Examine menu. A keen hunter knows their prey, and if the enemy is visible, you can examine them to find out more about them. I generally compare the enemy's initiative to my own turn, which you can check under this tab. In a change from the D20 system, BG3 uses a D4 initiative, meaning both you and the enemy can roll 1 to 4 to add on top of your initiative score. Let me give you an example. Here is one of the highest initiative enemies in the game, Cazador, who has plus 10 initiative. At this stage of the game, Mummy Milkers has plus 12 initiative, meaning Cazador will only go first if he rolls a 4 and we happen to roll a 1. In the event we both roll the same initiative, the player gains the first turn. Another feature of Dread Ambusher is the Dread Ambusher attack, an additional attack that does 1d8 damage on top of your weapon attack and does not cost any action at all. Incredible economy for level 3 and especially early Act 1. This attack is only available on the first turn, and trust me, if you're willing to fight dirty, you can have as many first turns as you want with this build. Last but not least, the most broken and desired ability of Dread Ambusher, the ability to hide as a bonus action. No, this is not a joke. Hiding literally breaks the game. Let me give you some visual examples. Here, I attack the ogre, hide, then end my turn. The ogres do nothing. I get my turn again, so what do? Attack, hide, and turn. Rinse repeat until my enemies expire. In this next example, I am in darkness. I attack, move away from the threatened range, and then Dread Ambusher hide, giving me complete immunity and breaking the game. For a more detailed explanation on how the mechanics work, please refer to the How to Stealth Archer section of the video. As for your spell choice for level 3, pick whatever. Hunter's Mark is rarely used by me because the bonus action is always used for hide, leap, or multi-class abilities. Another feature people tend to overlook about Gloomstalker is the Disguise Self spell. This is an early game boon as it allows you to bypass the goblin camp encounters if you use a Drow Disguise, seriously boosting you closer to level 4 early within a playthrough. Being a Drow or being disguised as a Drow allows you to skip the ambush at the Blighted Village, the fight with Berserk and his crew at the windmill, the southern checkpoint, and the guards inside the front door. At level 4, we get a feat and the pick is Sharpshooter. This feat gives us an additional 10 damage at the cost of -5 to our attack rolls. The damage makes a huge difference and will destroy our enemies. However, it comes with a huge accuracy penalty. We can offset the penalty many ways, but the most low-key method for me is just to equip the Risky Ring, which I can obtain by level 4 if I path for the Moon Lantern skip within an hour of a fresh playthrough. However, if you prefer to stay within Act 1, here are some methods to help with the accuracy penalty. Shooting from the high ground, attacking from hide, Oil of Accuracy, Volo's Bless Ring or Bless from a teammate, Magic Weapon, Elemental Weapon, Stun, Prone or Hold Person from a teammate. I highly recommend toggling it off when your hit rate is below 60% or if you don't need the extra damage to finish off a low HP enemy. Level 5 is a major breakpoint for us as we gain an additional attack. Not many enemies will survive 3 attacks on your first turn in this game. This is a massive power spike and allows your ranger to delete any priority target with their high initiative. Regarding spells, I pick Pass Without Trace, which adds a flat 10 bonus to stealth checks and lasts until the next long rest, meaning you can just cast it once and forget about it. These stealth checks help immensely with greater invisibility rolls and make this spell an easy catalyst for the strange Conduit ring, giving us free psychic damage. Onto multiclassing. At level 6, we're going to start taking rogue levels. Our first rogue level gives us Sneak Attack, which is a bonus 1d6 damage against enemies we have advantage on. And guess what? We're going to have advantage all of the time thanks to a certain ring, meaning this damage is pretty much free. We also gain proficiencies. Here I highly recommend picking Stealth to avoid detection and Athletics for shoving and throwing enemies. Oh but Evelyn, didn't we dump our strength? Yes or no, sweetie? We will solve that in the gearing section. Next, at level 7, we add another level onto Rogue, gaining Cunning Action, a very useful bonus action abilities that synergize with our playstyle. Cunning Action Dash, incredibly useful for getting in range for a shot forcing an enemy to dash to you, or getting out of trouble. I use this one quite a bit to help me with positioning, cunning action disengage. I don't use this one often because I prefer to just point blank darkness arrow my enemies to avoid an opportunity attack. But if you do find yourself at arm's length of an enemy, just bonus action disengage and fire for effect. Level 8, we gain an additional 1d6 to our snake attack, but more importantly, we gain our subclass. This probably sounds ridiculous, but this subclass is so powerful with the way it works with our build and playstyle, means we can pretty much finish the game without any further levels. That subclass is Assassin. What makes it so powerful? Let's go over the features. Assassin's Alacrity. You regain your action and bonus action at the start of combat. Perfect for our sneaky playstyle. If you decide to attack an enemy outside of turn-based combat, you regain that action point and can attack again with it. Let me give you an example. Here I sensed a Githyanki ambush at the bridge. Deciding to take the initiative, I notched my arrow to make an out-of-combat attack, and when it landed, it pulled me into turn-based combat. My action is refreshed, and that opening attack was free. Notice how the enemies are surprised, which brings me to my next point. Assassinate Ambush. Successful attack rolls against a surprised creature are always critical hits. See how their portraits are grayed out? Any hits against a surprised enemy will be guaranteed critical hits. Another fun fact is when you use an arrow of many targets, if your first hit is a critical, all the bounces will also be criticals. Combine this with surprise, hold person, or hold monster for absolute insanity. With our Act 3 gear, these criticals will be more than doubled with all the riders applied. 250 plus damage, and trust me, this is just the beginning. Regarding surprise rounds, let me start you off with some simple methods to guarantee them. Attacking from invis within the enemy's sight radius, using a bonus action ability such as Hunter's Mark or Illithid Powers are highly consistent. I have simplified this for now, but I will go over more methods in the how-to section. For now, let's go over the last assassin feature, Assassinate Initiative. You gain advantage on attack rolls against creatures that haven't taken a turn. At this point in the game, we have equipment that gives us permanent advantage anyway. So while this is a great feature, it's not really relevant to us. Moving on to level 9, we're going to pick our last level in Rogue for the feat, and that feat being ability score improvement, adding +2 to dexterity. By now, we should be at 20 dexterity, which is huge. It's a +5 to initiative, attack rolls, and AC, provided we are wearing specific armors with uncapped AC. Level 10 is where we start moving into our fighter levels. The first fighter level isn't that significant, but picking defense for fighting style is a nice little +1 to our AC. Some players, particularly on console, may spend more time in turn-based combat, which can make the small bonus pretty valuable. Level 11, we get our last level in fighter, granting Action Surge. When we use Action Surge, we gain an extra action during our turn, and trust me, when Mummy Milker's Action Surges, it is literally over for the enemy. The Nova we get from this extra action will delete any encounter, a perfect crunch for any fight or solo run. For our final level, there are two options I use, depending on how I feel about a particular run. The first option is one level as a War Domain Cleric. This War Cleric level is the most optimized version of my build. The only cantrip I care about here is Guidance to save me from the tedium of equipping the Silver Pendant on a solo run, and for spells I recommend Sanctuary for another method of escaping danger, and create water, because when Shadowheart, the actual main reason we picked War Cleric, is the ability to make an additional attack as a bonus action. This uses a War Priest charge, which regenerates over long rest. An alternate split I do find myself using, just because I'm lazy with long resting, is Rogue for the last level. Rounding out our sneak attack bonus to 3d6, granting us the uncanny dodge reaction to reduce incoming damage by half when an attack hits us. That is, if any attack hits us. With the build complete, I just wanted to remind you that my Stealth Archer is a concept for the community to expand upon. However, here are some common build variants. The Bard Archer is the Swords Bard variant of the build. Slashing Flourish is incredible, and Stealth, who is a good friend of the channel, has a fantastic build guide video on it if you wish to check it out. Yes, sweethearts, I truly understand that Slashing Flourish is stupidly broken, but please do understand that the main things that keep me from using this variation personally, you will struggle in Act 1 with initiative, and you do not have the longbow proficiency for the Titanstring. Your first feat is highly contested. You will need damage with Sharpshooter, yet you are not winning in initiative without alert. Finally, and I cannot stress this enough, your second martial attack comes at level 6, which is a big stretch in the early game. Typically you reach level 6 around the end of Act 1. Waiting that long for a second attack, especially without Dread Ambusher, feels kind of awful and can leave you vulnerable. If you're looking for a more dialogue focused variation on the build and are comfortable sacrificing the early game power, this version might be worth a shot. The Rivington Rat, an Eldritch Knight Archer variant. This was the build I used during the Impossible Challenge, only because enemies survived past turn 1. I chose it because it's great for sustained fights, with the fighter's third attack at level 11 and the defense from the shield spell is quite nice. I highly recommend the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel to synergize with Eldritch Strike. This is my typical gameplay loop. Open with arrow many targets to build arcane acuity and give enemies stricken with Eldritch Inertia. Bonus action hold person or monster and then auto crit the entire battlefield with arrows and many targets. The main reasons this isn't the variation for me are these. The impact of a Gloomstalker in Act 1 is unmatched. The Dread Ambusher attack and initiative really boosts your early game power, and the Dread Ambusher hide is a literal lifesaver in the stretch of the game where you need it most. The Rivington Rat also relies on many consumables, scrolls, arrows, and a certain Act 3 ring. So not only is its full power gated behind Act 3, it can be also extremely expensive to run comfortably without a lot of hassle. That being said, it is a community favorite variation and is definitely one of the strongest builds at the very end of the game. The Eldritch Knight is still a fighter subclass, so it won't leave you completely hopeless in Act 1, but I'm a big believer in making the early game as smooth as possible and building on that all the way to late game. Let's go over the Act 1 gear for our Stealth Archer. The order of appearance will be top to bottom, starting with the headpiece, the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, looted from one of the Ardents in the Inquisitor's Chamber of the Kresh, which means you have to handle one of Act 1's hardest fights. I recommend the use of Darkness or Prone to keep his swords from spawning, and an attack from either a summon or teammate to remove his ready to parry condition to maximize your damage. Arcane Synergy causes our weapon attacks to deal additional damage equal to our Wisdom modifier after we inflict a condition on a target. At level 5, this means an extra 9 damage on our first turn from our 2 martial attacks and Dread Ambusher. The game is very generous with what it considers a condition, but for now, with the way that we set up this build, you will always be inflicting a condition. I'll go over this in more detail when we get to the boots and Illithid Powers. In the cloak slot, I have the Deathstalker Mantle. I have to preface this section by saying you do not need this cloak for the build to work. It is just a nice bonus to have. Don't feel pressured to play Dark Urge just to get it. I'll explain enough alternate methods of playing that don't require it. Exclusive to the Dark Urge storyline, to obtain one of the most powerful cloaks in the game, you just have to long rest until you receive the cutscene, and then a few more times until your butler hands you the Deathstalker Mantle. The wearer of the mantle gains the shadow itself. Once per turn after you kill an enemy, you turn invisible for 2 rounds. You should have enough damage output to delete an enemy per turn of combat, meaning you go invisible. Once invisible, I recommend moving from your last known location so that after the enemy tries to reveal you, combat will reset and you will have another first turn with Dread Ambusher should you decide to engage again. If you're powerful enough to one-shot your targets, you can consistently pop in and out of invisibility, assassinating groups of enemies. To top this all off, attacks made from invisibility have advantage, greatly increasing your chance of hitting and damaging hard. Next, we have our armor piece, and we're going to go with the Graceful Cloth. It is a fairly expensive purchase or a lootable item from Mesfa in the Mountain Pass. Do be careful if you decide to fight her, as she's level 5 5 with 2 martial attacks. The Graceful Cloth is a bit of a fashion crime, but it has some nice features. The main things we're interested in here are the +2 to dexterity and Cat's Grace, giving us advantage on all dexterity checks. This does include stealth rolls, but it's also worth keeping this piece for the sleight of hand checks when you need to pick locks or pockets. It also halves your falling damage, increases your jump distance by 1.5 meters, and gets you an additional +1 to dexterity saving throws. I do understand that the Graceful Cloth is near the end of Act 1, so let me give you some earlier alternatives. I love using Lae'zel's Gift Yankee half plate from the very start, which gives us 15 AC and +2 from our dex modifier for 17. Another option is to use a Darkness Arrow to steal the enchanted +1 breastplate from beside Damon for another 17 AC and 1 piercing damage reduction. Our glove slot is the Gloves of Archery, purchased from Grat the trader, who is found at the Goblin camp. The Gloves of Archery add an additional 2 damage to ranged weapon attacks. Nice and simple, unlike our next item, the boots of Stormy Clamour. These boots are locked behind a little quest, so let's go through the steps together, shall we? We want to make our way to the Arcane Tower. Here's my preferred method for avoiding the turrets. First, make sure you bring Featherfall with you. If no one in your party knows the spell, there are potions and scrolls available from vendors. Cast Enhanced Leap and Featherfall. Jump towards this rock. This should immediately put you into turn-based mode and refresh your movement and action economy. Use this to jump towards the stairs and hide behind the pillar.
Moving ahead.
This next turn, I like to jump on the mushroom cap, and from here, you are safe from the arcane turrets. Find the sussy flower on top of tree roots, and then use that flower to reactivate the elevator. Once activated, take the lift up another floor. Here, you can collect the Timar spores and tongue the madness mushrooms you'll need for the quest. After collecting these 2 ingredients, return to the Markenid colony, talk to Blurg, and have him summon Emilium. Let Emilium know you have the ingredients, then drink his concoction. By doing so, you'll be able to trade with him and purchase the boots of Stormy Clamour. Whenever the wearer inflicts a condition upon a hostile target, they also inflict 2 turns of Reverberation. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what is a condition and what is Reverberation? Let's start with Reverberation. When the entity has 5 or more turns of Reverberation, it takes 1d4 thunder damage and must succeed a DC 10 con saving throw or fall prone. The condition is removed afterwards. Now let's move on to how we're going to inflict a condition. The easiest and most low effort way to apply a condition is with Ability Drain, a passive Illithid power that drains 1 dexterity on hit per turn. Yes, literally every time you attack, you inflict a condition with this power. I will go into more detail about this in the Illithid ability section. However, if you desire a non-Illithid playthrough, I recommend using the bow in the Honourable Mentions section. The final thing I love about the boots of Stormy Clamour is the Thundercrack sound design. The satisfying snappy boom really adds impact to your arrows, making it feel as if you're raining artillery down upon your foes. Taking up our main hand slot is the Club of Hill Giant Strength. I know I said we'd go in sequence, but we actually get this from the same place as the ingredients for the boots, so I'm bringing them both up together. To obtain this club, I recommend taking the Arcane Tower lift to the bedroom floor. On this floor, you want to interact with a book in the corner called The Roads to Darkness. Ascend to the top floor where you are greeted by Bernard. Since we interacted with the Roads to Darkness book, we can safely pick the first option here, avoiding combat. With free access to this floor, you want to head to the northeastern corner where you'll find a magical stall. If you break this stall, you can grab the Club of Hill Giant Strength. The holder of this item gains 19 strength passively, perfect for an elixirless run and a good pairing for Bloodlust. We want this item to pair with an overpowered ranged weapon later. The amulet slot is taken by Broodmother's Revenge. This amulet is found on Korga, and do be careful, Moonbeam is quite a powerful spell. Whenever the wearer is healed, their weapon deals an additional 1d6 poison damage. 1d6 is quite substantial at this point of the game, and to trigger it is very simple. Just pop a potion just before or during combat using your bonus action. However, here is a little cheeky hack you can do. In the forest near Scratch, there are raspberry bushes. Collect as many of these as you can. These raspberries are amazing paired with Broodmother's Revenge. They do not cost any action or bonus action to use whatsoever, so whenever you feel feel like you need a 1d6 poison damage boost, munch on one of these raspberries to proc Broodmother's Revenge. Speaking of procking, remember this interaction for our next item. For our first ring slot, we're going to go with the Whispering Promise. Purchased from Volo, the wearer of the Whispering Promise gains Blessed Mercy. Whenever you heal a creature, it gains a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws for 2 turns. Basically a mini bless that procs on heal, amazing to offset the accuracy penalty imposed by Sharpshooter. Remember the raspberries we collected earlier? They're perfect for both triggering Broodmother's Revenge and Blessed Mercy at the same time. Also, small potions are very cheap and plentiful if you prefer to trade a bonus action or these bonuses. Our second ring slot is the Strange Conduit Ring, found inside of an elegant chest in the Inquisitor's Chamber. It is visibly guarded by the Githyanki, so prepare for a fight if you want to obtain it. However, if you're stealthy and sneaky like me, you can shoot a darkness arrow, hide, and then pillage it from the chest. The wearer of the ring gains Strange Conduit. When concentrating on a spell, the wearer's weapon attacks deal an additional 1d4 psychic damage. With our ranger, we have Pass Without Trace, which lasts until long rest. For me, I just cast it once and set and forget, letting me proc the 1d4 psychic all the time as free damage, meaning these two pair really well together. For our offhand slot, I have 2 suggestions here. First is the Adamantine Shield. To create the Adamantine Shield, you first need the shield mold, which is located on the skeleton at the very top of the stairs near the room of the Hellboars and Merrigan. Next, you'll need some mithril ore. One can be found in a lava area near some animated armors, and another vein can be found past the lava method ambush. Do be very cautious of this ambush, as it's wiped me a few times, Sully. A trick you can do is to enter snake mode, make your way to the shallow crossing here, and shoot a darkness arrow. You then stand up to be surprised, but since you are under the cover of darkness, you are not pulled into combat. Feel free to teleport away here to safety, or you can wait for them to turn away from you and sneak back the way you came. From here, place the ore in the crucible at the forge and the mold in the mold chamber. Pull the forge lever to descend the platform to the lava level. Here I like to teleport back and shoot an arrow at the lava valve to trigger the encounter and have the high ground. Grim is vulnerable to bludgeoning damage, so the hammer works wonders on him. If you have access to minor illusion, you can lure him onto the hammer and shoot the lever to bonk. However, I'm very lazy and have an appetite for cheese, so I just stand on the high ground and throw shoes at him for very effective damage, but feel free to fight him with other methods. Here's an alternative method to get the shield early without fighting him. Grim starts his patrol immediately, so you have to be very quick here. First, shoot the lava valve to trigger the cutscene and summon Grim. Immediately use the hammer, then crouch. Activate turn-based mode and jump across the lava to grab the shield. It took me a few tries to get the timing down for this, as Grim starts moving very quickly after the cutscene, but he's consistent enough with his pattern. With a bit of practice, you can grab the Adamantine Shield without a fight. The Adamantine Shield gives us a +2 to armor class, a great boost to our survivability. The main feature of this shield I adore is the fact that attackers can no longer land critical hits on us. I've had many solo runs end due to a lucky enemy hit, but having the crit immunity solves that issue. When a melee attack misses you, the attacker is sent reeling for 2 turns, which reduces their next attack roll by -2. This is also a condition, so it synergizes with our boots for Stormy Clamour. Another suggestion I have for the offhand slot is the Knife of the Undermountain King. This short sword can be purchased from Jira, the Githyanki quartermaster at the Creche. You can also loot it off her, but I recommend holding off on that for now because she's a very good source of potions and arrows. The Knife of the Undermountain King grants the following features: Organ Rearranger. Reduce the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking by 1. When you roll 2 damage or less, re-roll the dice and take the highest result. This is useful for getting the occasional crit, but there's nothing really better for the slot until Act 3. And Shadow Blade. You gain advantage on attack rolls against lightly or heavily obscured enemies, although it's not stated anywhere. This advantage applies to your ranged weapons and spells as long as you have this weapon equipped. The best until last. One of the strongest weapons in the game, the Titanstring. To obtain the bow, you have 2 options. The first one is to complete the quest, find the missing shipment. This shipment event is located in a cave surrounded by gnolls. You have a few options here. The first is a pretty difficult encounter, helping Rugen and Nolly fight the gnolls. If you choose this route, I recommend using the cave entrance as a choke point. Prioritize the hunters because they can attack you up to 3 times. Stay away from Flint because she will stun you. Another method is to approach from outside, interact with the absolute symbol, and then just walk into battle. Flint will run up to you. Then you can use your Illithid Powers to turn her onto her pack. My preferred method is approaching from the rear. And using Enhanced Leap to jump from this platform to this platform and to the end, avoiding any lethal traps. I then sneak and jump right next to the chest, grabbing it and then teleporting away. No matter how you get it, with the chest in hand, the next step is to head to the Centrum hideout. In honor mode, the least risky entry from Wukane's Rest is to jump on the roof here, then down next to the wall and sneak through the gap. You will skip the explosive check doing it this way. Head down the hatch and grab the key from the bottom crate here, which unlocks the door to the Centrum basement. Depending on how events went with Rugen and Ollie, you might have to roll a check here with Saris, make your way across, then talk to her. As long as she gets the unopened Centrum shipment, Brem will unlock your secret inventory. If you skip the fighting and just stole the chest, you might not have the option to hand it over. If that happens, just go back to the cave entrance where the gnolls were initially and get close enough just to update the quest. With the Titanstring now in Brem's inventory, you can either purchase it off him or stage a workplace accident. Shove Saris off the ledge and send a little fire after her for a very satisfying visual. The second method of acquiring the Titanstring is quite simple. If you miss the entire Centrum questline, you can purchase it off Landharv, the Bugbear, and Moonrise Towers. The Titanstring deals game-breaking damage from the moment you pick it up and will be our forever bow. There is no bow in the game that can match the Titanstring's damage. We tried, and even a legendary +3 can't touch the damage riders the Titanstring provides. This bow's signature feature is Titan Weapon, dealing additional damage equal to our strength modifier. Despite this emphasis on strength, note that it only applies to damage. Our attack rolls still rely on dexterity, which is why it remains our primary stat. The 2 easiest ways to increase our strength to synergize with this feature are either to drink a Hilljoin elixir for 21 or to equip the club with Hilljoin strength for 19. I cannot overstate how strong this extra damage is. For the following examples, I'm going to assume we used an elixir, giving us a +5 modifier at 21 strength. When you fire your bow at an enemy, you deal your normal piercing damage and dexterity modifier, then you add the bow's enchantment plus the 5 strength modifier on top. It gets even crazier, trust me. Let's say you use a special arrow like an arrow of Vilmata. The necrotic damage from the arrow causes the strength modifier from Titan Weapon to be added again. And yes, this works with any special arrow that deals additional damage. The most casual +10 damage for minimal effort, and that is just one attack in Act 1. This also works with Snake Attack and many other riders, which I'll go through in the final section. The point for now is the damage adds up really quickly and makes this weapon extremely hard-hitting. Just as a tease, and the reason why the Titanstring will be the best bow, in Act 3 there's a certain gear piece that makes our strength modifier ride 4 times, and trust me, it will blow your mind when you see hundreds of damage per arrow. Speaking of arrows, onto the next section. Let's go over consumables. We were just talking about arrows, so where do you find them? In Act 1, there is Damon and Aaron in the Grove, and in the Githyanki Creche is Jira, who is my preferred arrow dealer. These arrows can start costing a lot, but if you picked up and tracker at character creation, you should have sleight of hand proficiency for a 5-finger discount. I will warn you that getting into trouble with the Githyanki isn't great, and Jira has hold person, so I personally do not take that risk. As for which elemental arrow to purchase, that is your preference. But if you really want an answer out of me, I like the ice arrow for goofy slimps and the Ilmata arrows to both stop the healing and not splash the surface, but all the arrows have a place. I also recommend buying Roaring Thunder arrows as well for gravity kills, but do not rely on them because the DC 12 strength saving throw is easily passed by most enemies you want to yeet. With that being said, I do want to place a lot of emphasis on something. Start hoarding darkness arrows, as many as you can from each and every vendor. These have incredible utility. They can blind enemies, giving you a free disengage. They can shut off an area, letting you steal anything in front of NPCs or let you pickpocket in busy areas. And they counter many bosses in the game. I'm not joking. The majority of bosses, the Hag, Inquisitor, Merkel, Cazador, and many more. Trust me, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, is darkness is stupidly broken. And speaking of broken, the most powerful use of this arrow, giving yourself invincibility. By literally pressing Dread Ambush or hide in your darkness arrow, you break the AI and almost no enemy will target you. There are very few exceptions to this. You are pretty much safe from any enemy that does not have Devil Sight. A pro tip, if you're on PC, you can press T when hovering over the darkness cloud to inspect how many turns are left. This is very useful for timing when to fire another one. There are many more arrows to go through, but I'll categorize them by trader table, which is what the trader stocks based on what level your character is. These arrows are 1 to 5, and I will discuss the level 6 arrows in the Act 2 section. Let's move on to elixirs. You have two options here. Hilljoint elixirs can be purchased in bulk from Auntie Ethel. She is my preferred dealer as she stocks 3 at a time. Did you know vendors refresh every single time you level up or take a long rest? I personally take advantage of this by going to Ethel each time I level up and purchasing a stack if I'm running a party. The final elixir that is quite powerful is the Bloodlust elixir. It is an uncommon elixir that occasionally shows up when you trade with Dereth in Act 1, Araj, Roa, or Tally in Act 2. Another method is to craft them using 3 Walk Fangs and combine them with any salt. Once per turn, when you kill an enemy, you gain 5 temporary HP and an action. And trust me, with your damage output, you'll be destroying at least one enemy a turn. If you do choose to use this elixir, pair it with the Hilljoint Club to give yourself 19 strength to use with the Titanstring, speed potions, crafted from hyena ears, and salts. Regarding salts, you'll find rogue morsels everywhere, and most alchemy vendors carry a fairly large amount. Rogue morsels are my favorite way to farm salts because they're just so easy to come by. For the cost of a bonus action, you gain the effects of haste for 3 rounds, meaning a +2 to AC, additional move speed, and an extra action. This is great for giving us a little extra push to survive, escape, or finish an encounter, and we can lean on these quite heavily over the course of the game. If you don't have a bonus action available, you can sacrifice an attack to throw one of these at your feet, or even throw one on the ground before combat starts to let you walk through it and maximize your first round action economy. Trading a bonus action for +2 AC, movement speed, and 1 extra action could bail you out in a bad situation. Here are some healing items that cost no action economy to use, making them perfect for proccing the Whispering Promise Ring and Broodmother's Revenge. Raspberries are found in the forest next to Scratch, some bushes near the Blue Jay in the mountain pass, and the final spot is in a camp overlooking the city just before you reach Rivington. There are quite a number of raspberries, and they should last you until the end of the game. They do also count as camp supplies, so remember to check the game isn't trying to use them at long rest. If you're playing a Dark Urge, you can find and eat roasted dwarf meat in the goblin camp, placed just over the spit. Next, let's discuss Illithid Powers. You definitely don't need these powers for a successful run, but they do make it easier to inflict conditions and can offer you some powerful options and flexibility as you progress. I will go in order of importance and what you should aim for first, starting with Ability Drain. Once per turn, when you make an attack roll, the attack reduces the target's corresponding ability by 1, which in our case is Dexterity. This Illithid power achieves a few things for our build. Firstly, the more we attack an enemy, the more we drain their Dexterity, reducing their armor class, which in turn makes every subsequent attack easier and easier to hit. Additionally, if the enemy continually losing their Dexterity, the Dex saving throw will also deteriorate. But my favorite interaction of Ability Drain is the condition it applies directly synergizes with the Boots of Stormy Clamour. Each attack you do will apply Reverberation, and the sound is like music to my ears. Each turn of Reverberation decreases the enemy's strength, dex, and con saving throws by 1, and when they reach 5 or more turns of Reverberation, they have to succeed a DC 10 saving throw or fall prone. a powerful synergistic combo for our Stealth Archer. Try it out, it is amazing. From here, the next ability I like to aim for is Favorable Beginnings. The first attack roll or ability check you make against any target gains a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus. This is perfect for our Nova strat, as you have a massive bonus on each new enemy. Next, I like to go for Cold the Weak. When you bring a creature down to fewer hit points than the number of Illithid Powers you have, it dies, and all nearby creatures take 1 to 4 psychic damage. To summarize, the more space gummies you eat, the more likely your enemies are going to explode when you shoot them. The strength of this build will mean you consistently threshold enemies and cause frequent explosive chain reactions. Some other mentions of Illithid powers that might be relevant for now: Shield of Thralls, a bubble that gives you 10 temporary HP, but what really stands out to me is if an enemy manages to go through this temporary HP, the shield pops and the enemy has to roll a DC 15 intelligence saving throw or become stunned. This has saved many of my solo runs, and I always have this on for safety. The last mention for Illithid power is Luck of the Far Realms. You can use a reaction when you hit an attack roll to make this attack a critical. If you ever want to blow up an enemy, this is the Illithid power to use. However, it is once per long rest, and I generally do not use this because I only long rest once in Act 1 and 2 once I get this build running. I prefer to only use Luck of the Far Realms for one particular enemy in Act 3 for solo runs. Regarding what you should do with the rest of your space gummies, just eat them and place them anywhere. The more you have, the higher threshold Cold Awake will have, and it's incredibly powerful. If you're running this build in a party, I recommend you give your Stealth Archer as many as possible. Let's go over some buffs we will obtain in Act 1. The first one is the only relevant option for most playthroughs. Towards the end of Act 1, I recommend going for the Hacker. It's not mandatory, but a nice boost to our power. Our goal for the fight here is to reduce your HP to 29 or below and stand next to him. This fight is quite scary, with our illusory copies having access to hold person and a very hard-hitting Ray of Sickness. Let me go over some fight strategies that will help. A Darkness. I recommend hiding in a Darkness arrow at the end of your turn so the images do not target you. You can locate the real hag, who has the Feywild trait, and she also has a red sash compared to her images. If you manage to get to the phase where she imitates Myrina, to easily tell the difference between them, Myrina has a baby bump and the hag is a higher level. Here are some recommendations if you're doing a solo run. A failsafe is to fight her with the Ring of Reaction, making you immune to hold person. Then I would recommend first covering yourself in darkness, then revealing her with any AoE arrow. From patch 8 onwards, this fight will always start as a surprise round against you, so this will provide you with safety. Once you've reduced her HP to 29 or below, end your turn next to her. She will then engage in dialogue with you. Feel free to do the dice roll to save both Myrina and obtain the power. Do note that using any spells here to help with the dialogue check can re-trigger the fight by spawning more copies, meaning you lose the hair. But if you're lazy like me and prefer no variants to your run, just trade Myrina for the power. Here, we want the +1 permanent bonus to dexterity. At this stage of the game, depending on which armor set you have equipped, you will either have 18 or 20 dexterity, which is a +4 or a +5 respective boost to our attack rolls, saving throws, and armor class with the armor we pick up in Act 2. The safest, which is really hard to say, so it's called the gamer chair for now, is located in the Githyanki Creche between Act 1 and 2. This chair forces you to make 3 saving throws in order to make your Illithid powers available as a bonus action instead of actions. The first is a DC 12 intelligence saving throw. Second is a DC 15 wisdom save. And finally, a DC 18 con, wisdom, intelligence, or charisma save based on your class. Quick disclaimer here, I'm lazy and I don't do much to prepare for this, so this won't be a full list of possible buffs, just the most low effort options. The Headband of Intellect, which you can get by killing or pickpocketing Lump in the Blighted Village, sets your intelligence to 17. Bless, obtainable from either the Whispering Promise sold by Volo, the Staff of Arcane Blessing found in the Arcane Tower, or an Elixir of Heroism. If you do decide to skip to Act 2 early for gear, remember to remove the Risky Ring and apply the Shadeclinger buff. Just make sure to set up your buffs before you take a seat. The following section is related to buffs and is mostly aimed at challenge and solo runners. To really get the most out of these buffs, you'll need to plan ahead and be prepared not to long rest at all until Act 3. Bliss Spores. Bliss Spores can be obtained from Sovereign Spore once you've defeated the Duaga on the beach. This fight is quite tough, and I recommend being at least level 5 before taking them on. There are many conventional strategies to beat them, but how about I give you some really strange, mean methods for fun. You can stuff all the bodies on the beach into the basket to stop Gek from turning them into zombies. You can also use Glut to revive a Minotaur or the Bullet for a powerful summon, but for me personally, I prefer Arabella because the children yearn for the mines, and apparently they do not enter the turn order. Return back to Sovereign Spore once you've defeated the Dwager to obtain the Bliss Spores. This incredibly powerful buff gives you a 1d6 bonus to attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws until the next long rest. Not only does this give you crazy hit rate, but the ability checks help massively with dice rolls, and the saving throws have saved so many of my runs. This boon has single-handedly won many of my solo runs. Morning Lord's Radiance. Morning Lord's Radiance can be obtained by solving the puzzle at the monastery. You just need each ceremonial weapon. The mace can be looted from a kobold, the battle axe can be found next to the Guardian of Faith, and the warhammer can be found in the Eagle Nest. Personally, I find it more fun to just brute force and throw the weapons randomly until I get it right. And once you complete the puzzle, you gain Morning Lord's Radiance, giving our weapon attacks an additional 1d4 radiant damage. The last buff for Act 1 you're granted with is when you enter the Astral Prism in the Inquisitor's Chamber. Once you talk to the Guardian, you gain Bless, which gives you a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws. Honourable Mentions. Before we move on to Act 2 equipment, let's go over some Honourable Mentions. The Bow of the Banshee can be found on Corsair Greyman. You first see this Dwager on the boat, travelling towards the Grimforge. If you want this bow, do not push him into the water. You can fight him on the boat, or if you choose a more diplomatic approach, you can purchase it off him in the Grimforge, next to where the gnomes are trying to dig out near. The Bow of the Banshee has a chance to inflict Frightened on hit. Frightened creatures cannot move and have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. You also gain a 1d4 bonus to attack and damage against afflicted targets. This bow is honestly slept on and doesn't get enough love. It's not as powerful as the Titanstring in raw damage, but it does pack a punch and synergizes with our Boots of Stormy Clamour, inflicting Reverberation every time we apply Frightened. It's a perfect substitute for applying a condition if you are preferring a non-Illithid playthrough. The Gloves of Belligerent Skies can be obtained from a chest in the Inquisitor's Chamber. A Githyanki fighter is guarding this chest, so a Darkness Arrow can cover stealing it. When the wearer deals thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, inflict 2 turns of Reverberation upon the target. The radiant damage can come from the Morning Lord's Radiance buff, or we can use a certain Act 2 weapon to enchant a weapon to apply thunder or lightning damage. Having double the turns of Reverberation applied means in just 2 attacks, the enemies have to roll a saving throw or fall flat on their ass. The Act 2 gear is a massive step up in power, and you'll notice the difference compared to Act 1. I generally path to Act 2 within the hour on a fresh save if I'm doing a solo run just to get an early boost. If you're interested in trying to do this yourself, you can find a video walkthrough here as explaining things like the Moon Lantern skip are beyond the scope of this video. With that being said, let's go top to bottom again. The head and cloak slots remain the same with the Daedom of Arcane Synergy and our Deathstalker Mantle. For the non-Dark Urge players, your cloak slot is not that important in Act 2. The only other cloak really worth using is the Cloak of Protection, sold by Quartermaster Tally, but highly contested if you're in a party. +1 to AC and saving throws is good for everyone, so use it where you need it most. And don't worry about the cloak slot too much. Our armor slot is taken up by the Yuan-Ti Scale Mail. This armor can be purchased from Tally and is quite powerful. Exotic material adds our full dexterity modifier to our AC, meaning the 15 from the armor and +5 from dexterity gets us to a comfy 20 AC. At this point in the game, this is a crazy armor value, and barely anything has the attack rolls to hit us consistently, meaning you absolutely do not have to rely on stealth in combat. However, if you want to continue leaning on the Stealth Archer archetype, this armor doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth checks. On top of everything else, the +1 to initiative from Ambusher helps us get ahead of some of the fast enemies in the game, like Yugia and Balthasar, who are extremely tough encounters. This next armor is more of a setup piece for our build, the Shadeclinger Armour. Also purchased from Tally, this armor is used for one feature, Shadeclinger. While obscured, you gain advantage on saving throws. I want to preface this by saying you absolutely do not need to do this, as it is an unintended game feature, but it is here in this video if you want to make use of it. If you'd rather not use an exploit, feel free to skip to the next gear piece. For those who stayed, here's a tricky way to have the Shadeclinger conditions stay on, even when wearing different armor. First of all, find an obscured area. You can confirm this by seeing the Clinging Shadows buff. Next, unequip or change to a different armor piece. Your Clinging Shadows buff will remain until your next long rest and stay on even if you are in broad daylight. Unfortunately, the Risky Ring gives disadvantage on saving throws, but the Shadeclinger buff gives us advantage, which means the two cancel each other out, leaving us with a normal single dice roll. I'll keep the glove section brief here, but either we can use the gloves of Archery still, or swap to the gloves of Belligerent guys to pair with our Reverberation. However, I have some really fun glove choices in the Honourable Mention section. Our boots and amulet remain the same. The free poison and Reverberation damage is too good to pass up, and I can't get over that proc sound. The rings we will pick up in Act 2 will define our playstyle. They're that impactful. Starting with my favourite ring in all of Baldur's Gate 3, the Risky Ring. Purchased from Mirage from Moonrise Towers. The wear against risky attack, which provides advantage on attack rolls at the downside of receiving disadvantage on saving throws. Let's discuss why I believe this ring single-handedly is the greatest damage boost in the game. Advantage is incredibly strong. By rolling 2 dice each and every time you do an attack roll, you will A. rarely miss your target, B. be more likely to critically hit. This in turn means you are dealing consistently high damage. There is not a single playthrough where I skip this ring on my primary damage dealer. The Risky Ring is the most impactful equipment to your loadout. Okay, enough glazing about my favorite ring. Let's discuss the painful downside. Disadvantage on saving throws. This will get you killed unless you take measures to mitigate it. The laziest, most effortless way is to do the Shadeclinger glitch. However, if you're a purist, here are some other methods I use. Any gear that provides plus bonuses to saving throws, temporary buffs such as Bliss Force, Rapture, or Bless, which gives a crazy boost to saving throws and is my preferred method, or just don't get hit, which might sound like an absurd goal, but our next ring will make you invincible. And trust me, you will have to see it to believe it. The Eversight Ring. To obtain this ring, first you must make your way across the morgue. The poison surface here sucks, so stand at a distance and annihilate the zombies before they even come close. Or you can sneak past them. Don't worry, the poison doesn't damage you. Unlock the door, and in the laboratory room is a locked and trapped chest. Inside this chest is the Eversight Ring. The wearer of this item cannot be blinded. For how simple it is, the impact on our gameplay and playstyle is groundbreaking. Enemies do not know what to do when arrows just start appearing out of darkness. By having this ring equipped, you can simply set up a darkness using a scroll or arrow, stand in it, and start firing as many arrows as you want. While in darkness, the enemy will be blinded, giving them disadvantage to hit you, which is great. However, hiding in darkness means they can't even begin to look for you. They will all skip their turns, giving you invulnerability. Hiding in darkness honestly might as well be cheating with how badly it breaks the AI. I have completely substituted my greater invisibility for darkness because it is a lot more consistent and does not rely on increasingly difficult stealth rolls. There are many more uses for darkness, and I'll go over them in the how-to section, but here are a couple of non-combat uses. Cutting line of sight of hostile enemies for you to pass, stealing in busy areas. Darkness isn't perfect for the entire game. There are some enemies who have Devil Sight, which counters it, the most notable ones being Yugia and his Americans, the Warlock Captain of the Gif Yankee Ambush, the Imps in the House of Hope, and Raphael. Our main hand and offhand remain the same as our Act 1 choices. If you're using the Bloodlust Elixir, you'll need the Club of Heal Giant Strength. Pair it with either the Adamantine Shield or the Knife with the Undermountain King, depending on your needs. If you're using the Strength Elixir, I'd recommend just using the Knife and the Shield. However, one very important item I buy every playthrough is the Drakethroat Glaive. Purchased from Rowan Moonglow and Moonrise Towers, we want this weapon for its ability Draconic Elemental Weapon. When you cast Draconic Elemental Weapon onto your Titanstring, it receives a +1 to attack rolls, which might not seem like much, but it really does help. We also deal an additional 1d4 elemental damage of our choice, selected from acid, cold, fire, or lightning damage. The element we choose is going to depend on our gloves. For right now in the process, I've used Thunder damage with the gloves of Belligerent Skies, or pick whatever you prefer for the gloves of Archery. However, I'm going to show you some spicy synergies with a few gear changes in the Honourable Mentions. For the bow slot is still the Titanstring, our forever bow. No other bow in the game rides damage the way this baby does. As I said before, the only bow that even comes close isn't available until Act 3, meaning there's simply no significant competition. Let's go over some consumables for our archer. We will discuss the trader tables relevant to Act 2. What are trader tables? Simply put, it is what the trader will stock at certain levels, and in this section of the video, we will go over player level 6 to 9. Nice. Starting with the special arrows. Aside from buying darkness arrows every time you see them, you will start seeing new arrows being stocked from level 6. Let's start with my favorite damage arrow in the game, the arrow of many targets. When you shoot this arrow, it will bounce off your main target to 3 other targets in range. This range is more generous than you think. For instance, I've bounced the arrow off every Arcanist in the Brainstem fight. Now let me tell you a cheeky Evelyn tech. If you somehow crit with your primary target, each and every bounce will also be a critical. With our Assassin subclass guaranteeing critical hits against surprise targets, this arrow can delete an entire battlefield in the first turn, even without the surprise round. If you have a sweetie in your party to use hold person on a target, you can move within 3 meters of them to begin auto-critting arrow after arrow and completely removing huge groups of enemies. I have a confession. I have slept on the arrow of transposition for the longest time playing BG3. These arrows teleport the user where the impact lands. Very useful for going from darkness to darkness. I absolutely love sneaking past enemies using this method for better positioning and to set up a surprise round. It is very underutilized in the BG3 community. It might not do any damage, but the positioning alone carries the value of this arrow. Do note, even though we have extra attack with our class, using a transposition arrow will consume an entire action in battle, so do keep that in mind. Other arrows of note are the slaying arrows. They deal double damage to their respective time, and double damage does sound good, but trust me, with our damage riders in Act 3, we're going to turn that double into a quadruple. I generally plan ahead and start buying these when they appear on the traders, since they tend to be quite limited. I'll go over these in more detail later, but for now, I tend to keep an eye out for the undead, fiend, humanoid, construct, and aberration slaying arrows and start stockpiling early. Moving on from arrows, let's discuss one particular scroll. Greater Invisibility Scrolls. Purchased from Volo, Roa Moonglow, and Tally, these scrolls should appear at these vendors when you're at level 5 and above. Greater Invisibility turns you invisible, giving you advantage on attack rolls, but this version only breaks if you fail a stealth check. Starting in patch 8, the formula for the stealth check now varies by difficulty. For every difficulty up to Tactician, the first stealth check will be a DC 15 and increases by 1 per check. For Honor mode, the first check will be a 15, the second check will be 16, then the difficulty ramps up exponentially to 19, 24, 31, 40, and beyond. The formulas are listed on the wiki, but the main takeaway from the change is that you should only expect to make an average of 3 or 4 stealth checks now on Honor mode. Do note, this spell only lasts for 10 turns and can be increased to 20 turns using a sorcerer with extended meta magic, which is worth considering for Tactician difficulty and below. This spell alone can turn BG3's turn-based combat into a real-time action RPG. This stealth archer concept blew people's minds many years ago when it was relatively fresh, but it also has been around in the community for a while now. It's a super fun gimmick that's worth the shot, but this build does not depend on it. The investments we've made into stealth at this point make passing those checks quite likely, but it's worth remembering the plus 10 bonus we get from Pass Without Trace. Hope it Evelyn, I'm Pass Without Trace and Greater Invis both concentrations. Yes, sweetie, I've seen your comments. They are indeed both concentration spells. A character can only concentrate on one spell at a time. If you want both, you'll need 2 characters. If you're solo and not sure which to prioritize, Greater Invisibility is always the best choice. Other methods to help would be to pick equipment that provides advantage on stealth checks, Cat's Grace from another party member, or certain racial bonuses. And the last consumable is a Cloud Giant Elixir. If you do reach level 9 in Act 2, you might see this stocked by Roa or Tally. I'll go over this elixir in more detail in Act 3, but for now all you need to know is that it increases your strength to 27, which really boosts the damage on our Titanstring and will help with the strength saving throws immensely in the Merkle fight. Here are some honourable mentions for gear, and I would highly recommend employing them. The flexibility gives you options for dealing with any situation and helps compensate for the few hard encounters the game can throw at this build. The Ice Archer version of the build is incredible for battlefield control. It's very low effort to set up, and the results are quite powerful. With each single attack you do, you will spread ice across the battlefield. The slippery surface reduces enemy movement, forces them to waste action economy to reach you and your team. That is if they manage to not slip on their ass and miss their turn entirely. To achieve the Ice Archer variant, you'll need 3 gear pieces. The Cold Brim Hat. To obtain this item, you first need access to Balthasar's room and Moonrise Towers, which you can easily get the key of Sorel following a conversation. Once in the room, pick up a hat off the table, interact with the top right part of the bookshelf, and then finally insert the hat into the pedestal, unlocking a hidden room where you'll find the Cold Brim Hat inside of a chest. The wearer of this item gains Cold Brim Chill. Any spell condition inflicted on a target also applies 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. Oh, but Evelyn, we're an archer and we don't apply any spell condition. Hang on, sweetie, we'll solve this soon with the gloves, which will be Winter's Clutches. These gloves can be purchased from Esper in the Mountain Pass. When the wearer inflicts cold damage, inflict 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost upon the target. What is Encrusted with Frost, and where is the cold damage coming from? We'll start with inflicting cold damage. Inflicting cold damage is easy. We can just use the Drakethroat Glaive's ability to buff our bow with cold, causing every attack we make to inflict cold damage on an enemy, which is how we're applying Encrusted with Frost. Encrusted with Frost is a little more complex, but nothing we can't handle. Okay, remember the Cold Brim Hat we picked up earlier? It says any spell condition inflicted on a target also applies 2 stacks of Encrusted with Frost. But Evelyn, we don't inflict any spell conditions. I know, but there's a really interesting interaction where the spell condition can be encrusted with frost itself, which means the effect stacks twice per instance of damage, adding 4 turns of encrusted with frost whenever we attack. When there are 7 or more turns remaining, the entity must succeed a DC 12 con saving throw or take 1d4 cold damage and become frozen. Frozen enemies are incapacitated for 2 turns. This is incredible, as we can either leave them frozen while they miss their turn and we shift our focus onto other enemies, or we can take advantage of the vulnerability to bludgeoning, thunder, and force damage to completely annihilate them. With that in mind, you might get some use out of the combination of the Neomissa, which deals force damage by default, and the Boots of Stormy Clamour, dealing thunder damage. The final ingredient for the Ice Archer is the Snowburst Ring, which can be found in the northern bedroom of Last Light Inn. A perception check is required to spot the hidden plank. If you manage to pass this check, you will find a ring that grants Snowburst. When the wearer deals cold damage, they also create a 4.5 meters circle of ice around their target. This allows your arrows to spread ice all across the battlefield, slowing down your enemy's movement and removing their turn entirely if they slip. An incredible disable for your party during a fight. Here's something fun you can try out. If you combine the Snowburst Ring and an arrow of many targets, you can spread ice across the battlefield in one attack. As for which ring slot to take, I change between this ring and the Eversight Ring all the time. It's honestly that good. The Ice Archer is my favorite variant of this build, and I can't recommend it enough for you to try. The Neomissa. You can purchase this hand crossbow from Roa Moonglow and Moonrise Towers. Why do we care? Well, can you see the damage type here? It's force damage. Not many enemies in the game can resist force damage. Whilst our Titanstring has more effective range and it does more damage, a couple of bosses are heavily resistant to piercing damage, and one enemy is even immune to it. It's nice to have the Neomissa in your back pocket for these situations. Pull it out for targets such as Fizzerbolt, the Shambling Mound, and Merkel. The Helmet of Arcane Acuity. To obtain this helmet, we must make our way to the Mason Guild's secret basement area. There's a keyhole here that is revealed by a perception check, and you'll need to either lockpick it or use Mattis's key to gain access. If you do not pass the perception check, you can misty step a little bit to the right here to bypass the secret door. From here, you can either fight the shadows or invis pass to steal the locked chest. Do note this locked chest is trapped and does a lot of damage, so be careful. The Helmet of Arcane Acuity provides a wearer with battle acuity. Whenever you deal damage with a weapon attack, you gain 2 turns of Arcane Acuity. What is Arcane Acuity? Basically, it's a +2 to spell save attack rolls and spell DC for each attack. Why do we care? If you're a challenge or solo runner, this spell save DC can disable a boss even through a legendary resistance. Here, you can see me shoot random furniture to build up my Arcane Acuity with a hold Monsieur scroll. You can see my success rate on Raphael is 95%, and after casting it, I fully commit my action economy to smoke him and his gang in a single turn. Shah's Spear of Evening. To obtain the spear, you will have to make Shadowheart's evil choice when confronting the Night Soul. This weapon provides blind immunity, but the most notable feature is the fact that you can cast Darkness as many times as you want without any resource cost. It has a per turn cooldown, which is 6 seconds if you're playing in real time. Very useful for saving on Darkness arrows or scrolls. Welcome to Act 3. This is generally where other builds start to come online. While other builds are just starting to catch up, we're starting our victory lap. If you think Stealth Archer was strong in the early acts, it snowballs even harder in Act 3 and trivializes the game with its 4-digit first turn Nova. Let's start with the helmet. The mask is Soul Perception. Located upstairs in the Devil's Fang, it can be found in a locked, gilded chest in the bedroom. The most notable feature of the mask of Soul Perception is the +2 to attack rolls. With our playstyle changing in Act 3, thanks to a certain chest piece, we're going to need the extra hit rate. It takes practice and care to get the exact sweet spot for the risky ring, and there's one boss in particular who threatens you no matter your positioning. Leveraging the accuracy benefit of this helmet really helps our consistency this entire act. Another incredible feature is having +2 initiative. There are a few notable high initiative enemies in this act, those being Dolor, Cazador, and Yugia. Having this little boost will make you beat these enemies. For a cloak slot, the Dark Urge players will want to keep their Deathstalker Mantle, as you'll be popping enemies in one shot and simply not being attacked. It's better than all the AC in the world. For the other Origin players, I recommend something for survivability in case you make a mistake. The Wavemother's cloak can be found in the Water Queen's house, in an opulent chest behind a desk on the upper floor. I recommend using Darkness or Invisibility to avoid detection. The Wavemother's cloak provides you with Damp Aegis, which gives you +2 to AC and saving throws. You are also prevented from burning and resistant to fire damage. This is only during combat and once per turn until you get hit. The final items required for our build are locked behind the Unholy Assassin questline. So let's go through the steps together. Note that your first step might include interrupting Dolor's assassination attempt at the Wine Festival if you triggered the quest in Rivington beforehand. This guide assumes you did not, but keep it in mind for your own playthrough. Once you arrive in the lower city, make your way to the Wine Festival, notch a Darkness arrow, and point blank Cora in the face. As long as you kill her and are shrouded by darkness, the guards won't confront you. Old mate should approach and comment on your method.
Sloppy.
And request that you take your next victim's hand. My next victim, I like to go for Nesha outside the Blushing Mermaid, as it's a convenient stop as I'm traveling across the city. Murder her with a Darkness arrow. Collect her hand and her other 3 goodies. Old mate will approach one final time and present you with the keen passphrase to Kendall Hallow. That's where our next stop is. Use that key to unlock the door, regardless of whether or not you pass this perception check. Move the painting to reveal a button and press it. This will move the bookcase to show a hidden door where we can use the passphrase we obtained. Next, we want to gain access to the Murder Tribunal, and since we have collected our victim's hand, normally we can just pass the Death Knights by presenting them. If you've killed Dolor at the Wine Festival or the tailor shop, then he won't show up here. However, with the sequence I have done this quest, Dolor usually appears for me at this location, and he is quite a tricky encounter. He has very high initiative, and the evasion is a pain to deal with. Be really careful, as he loves to throw a paralytic poison at you, which could spell the end of your character. Darkness is an excellent counter to him here. Once inside the Murder Tribunal, approach Serevok for a dialogue where he will summon an image of one of the murder victims. Since we killed the victims ourselves, we do not have to pass a DC check for this. Satisfied, he will lead you into another room where he's prepared Valeria as a sacrifice. End the Holophant's life to become an unholy assassin. Completing this questline allows you to trade with the Echo of a Buzzy Girl, unlocking some of the most powerful items in the game. Note that it is possible to get these items without becoming an unholy assassin. While in dialogue with Serevok, you can eventually choose the I'm ready to be judged option, causing the ghost of the murder victim to spawn in the room. Switch to your best faith and have them creep in and pick a Buzzy Girl's pockets. As an important warning, it is possible to fail these sleight of hand checks and turn the entire tribunal hostile style. In honor mode, you only get one chance, so I really do not recommend this option. The Bhaalist Armour. The wearer of this armor gains the following: Ambusher, a bonus +2 to initiative rolls. Perfect for being first to act and blowing up anything in the game with the next powerful feature, Aura of Murder. Enemies within 3 meters become vulnerable to piercing damage unless they are resistant or immune to it. A vulnerable means the enemy takes double damage from our Titanstring. This might not sound like much, but when you're doubling your damage to push every single individual arrow into triple-digit territory at a point in the game where the health pools range from around 150 to 700, it makes a massive impact. For those seeing this for the first time, you will not believe the damage. We have literally turned our bow into a shotgun. Until you've tried this for yourself, you will probably think this damage is cheating. To use this effectively, let's use an example. Here in this clip, I fly next to my enemy. Notice that they have the Aura of Murder debuff. Since we're so close to the enemy, we often have a penalty to hit rate. This can be offset a bit by using the Mask of Soul Perception mentioned earlier. However, there is a sweet spot where you can apply the Aura of Murder and still have the advantage on the attack roll provided by the Risky Ring. Would you believe me if I said we could quadruple our damage? Well, I guess you won't until I show you. The next 2 items from the same trader will do that. The Craterflesh Gloves can be purchased from a Buzzy Girl, one of the few damage rider sources surviving in honor mode post patch 8. The wearer of these gloves will gain Craterous Wounds. Whenever you score a critical hit, deal an additional 1d6 force damage. Before I explain the gloves further, let's gather the final 2 daggers for our build because they will be used in conjunction with the damage breakdown. Our daggers will be Dolor Amarus, and yes, there are 2 of them. The first one can be purchased from a Buzzy Girl, and the second one can be looted off Dolor once you deal with him. By wielding these daggers, whenever you score a critical hit, it deals an additional 7 damage. And yes, it does this damage even if you are using your bow and shooting arrows. You do not need to actually hit with your daggers to apply this effect. Now that we have all the pieces in play, let me show you how to break any damage numbers you are used to. I chose Answer to showcase this section here because not many things can survive more than 1 arrow, even at this point in the game. To fully utilize our gear, we need to crit our enemies. So here I opted to surprise him. As an assassin, we are guaranteed to hit a critical on surprised enemies. Next, I move close enough to Answer to apply the Aura of Murder. Here I select an undead slaying arrow and fire. That arrow did 253 damage. How did we arrive at that total? Let's break down the interactions. First, the damage from the attack, as you would expect. Weapon damage being 2d8 for a slaying arrow, 14, enchanted weapon +1, dexterity modifier +5, sharpshooter +10, cloud giant +8, $8, 7 + 7 for 14, totaling 52. And with the Bhaalist vulnerability, we double it to 104, and -4 from Great Worm Scale on Answer for a total of 100. But as you can see here in the log, we now have more than 2 entries for damage from just 1 attack. So what's happening here? Well, we've looked at the first entry, but the second looks very similar. The slaying arrows deal double damage against their intended target. They do this by utilizing the Titan weapon feature, like any other special arrow would, riding your strength and your dex modifiers to increase its damage. However, in this case, all of the weapon damage is doubled, meaning the total initial attack damage happens twice. So the second entry in our log breaks down the exact same way as before. For weapon damage, 2d8 for a slaying arrow, 13, enchanted weapon +1, dex modifier +5, sharpshooter +10, cloud giant +8, $8, 7 + 7, totaling 51. We double it with the Bhaalist vulnerability equals 102, and take away 4 from Answer's Great Worm Scales for a total of 98. But what are these instances of force damage? These are from the Craterflesh Gloves, and they only trigger on a critical hit. They should deal 1d6 force damage, but since they're being treated as critical damage themselves, they're dealing 2d6 instead. So the first instance we're seeing is because of the first instance of weapon damage. And what we're seeing here is force damage 2d6 for 10, $, 7 + 7 for 14, cloud giant +8, 32, -4 for a total of 28. But the second instance of Craterflesh applies because of the second instance of weapon damage and breaks down in the same way. Force damage 2d6 for 9, $, for 14, cloud giant +8, 31, -4, totaling 28. 27. Okay, to summarize, we had 2 instances of double force damage from Craterflesh, 4 instances of Cloud Giant Strength from Titan Weapon, and 8 instances of Dolor Amarus from our pair of daggers. To cap this all off, the Bhaalist Armour doubles the piercing damage, which is all of the damage included in both instances of weapon damage. Let's go over some consumables for Act 3, starting with the Cloud Giant Elixir. If you're a player level 9 and above, you can purchase the Cloud Giant Elixirs from Popper, Grishka, Damphalon, and Styling Horst in Rivington. For your traders in the lower city, you can find them from Daruf, Halsik, Araj, and Oliver. The Cloud Giant Elixir sets your strength to 27, which means we'll gain a +8 damage modifier for our Titanstring. +8 doesn't seem like much, but when it rides multiple times, as we just discussed under the gear section, it really pulls its weight. Another consumable, we want to obtain a special arrows to interact with our damage riders. In the Rivington area, you can purchase arrows from Popper, Exviciam, and Damphalon. In the lower city, your go-to trader is Fitz. I mentioned what arrows to purchase in the previous 2 acts, and the only new type is the Smoke Powder Arrow, which starts to appear at traders once you're a level 9 and above. It deals an additional 46 fire and 46 force damage in a 5-meter radius and knocks enemies back 3 meters. These are super fun, but I generally don't use them all that often because I have a big obsession with the multi-target arrow for group clearing. However, that's not to say that they don't have a place in your arsenal. Here are the arrows I generally like to buy. Arrows of many targets for clearing many enemies at once. Remember that we're set up to force chains of critical hits. Darkness arrows for cover, transposition arrows to teleport to darkness, and slaying arrows for the sweet damage riders to delete the big bads of Act 3. This is not a comprehensive list, but here are some notable ones. Undead slaying arrows for Ansa and Cazador, Fiend slaying arrows for Harlip and Raphael, Humanoid slaying arrows for Gortash and Orin, Construct slaying arrows for the Steelwatcher Titan, and Aberration slaying arrows for the final boss of the game. Do you want to hear about a secret consumable? Terrazol. To find a supplier for this substance, you first need to gain access to the guild hall. There are 2 methods you can use. First, convince Tosgrunt to let you in, or acquire his ring and insert it into the slot to reveal the secret entrance. The second method, you can take the manhole next to the Basilisk Gateway point, smash a wall, and then head west to find a DC-20 locked door, which leads to the guild hall. At the bar just inside, you'll find Severn, who will sell you Terrazol. These pouches are quite inexpensive, and consuming one will grant you the effects of haste. What makes this consumable special is the fact that it costs no action economy at all, meaning if you get into trouble in combat and you're out of options, it could in fact save your run. Not to mention, it can also stack on top of either a speed pot, haste, or mind sanctuary. To me, Terrazol is the ultimate crutch. You can use the extra action to throw or cast invis to drop combat, or to give you enough juice to finish an enemy. The move speed can give you a chance to reposition or flee altogether, or the +2 AC can protect you from enemy attacks. I do have to make this warning that the Terrazol Jitters kicks in after 2 turns and acts like lethargy, making you miss your next turn. If you are using a speed potion as well, it's worth considering using Terrazol in the round after, so both instances of lethargic happen on the same round. However, I'm kind of a degenerate and I really like my first round burst, so I tend to go all out. Another sneaky trick is to force lethargic at the end of your turn by consuming a second Terrazol before the jitters kick in from the first one. This resets the timer on the condition, so you do not miss your next turn at all. Just be very sure you want to end your turn before using it. Next, let's discuss Illithid Powers. Just a late reminder that you do not need these at all, but they do make you very powerful should you succumb to that temptation. Luck of the Far Realms allows you to change your successful attack roll into a critical hit and is once per long rest. It is great for forcing a crit on an enemy who you cannot surprise. It synergizes perfectly with our Craterflesh riders. The next Illithid powers are locked behind, becoming a partial Illithid. This is not a light choice to make in a playthrough, and it's valid if you do not want to go ahead with the Astral Space Gummy. But if you do, here are some standout abilities to the Stealth Archer. Fly is an ability you unlock by default if you make this choice. It is probably the most powerful thing about becoming partial Illithid, if I'm being honest. It costs only half your movement to use this ability, effectively doubling your available movement in combat if you use it consistently. Great for avoiding difficult terrain, getting over obstacles, and outmaneuvering your enemies. But my favorite thing about him is that it gives me the ability to set up for Aura of Murder, Mind Sanctuary. The other ability that is relevant to this build is Mind Sanctuary. When you use this ability, you create a Mind Sanctuary in a 9-meter radius. In Honor mode, creatures under the effect of Mind Sanctuary gain hastened. As of patch 8, the effect allows you to regain all of your martial attacks. So for our build, we can attack an additional 2 times under the Mind Sanctuary. It is incredible that your entire party can benefit from this effect. Also, Terrasol can be safely used in conjunction with it. Just do note your enemies will make use of it as well. There are some quite powerful buffs in Act 3, so let's go get them for our Stealth Archer. Sweet stone features. You can obtain this by commissioning Boney at the circus for 5,000 gold to make a statue of your character. Once you've paid the gold, you have to long rest in order to get this buff. Waking up, you will receive Sweet stone features, granting you a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws. Rapture. To gain the Rapture buff, you'll first need to head to Shares's Caress. Head upstairs, and in this room, you'll find Nisha and a Mind Flayer. Defeat this Mind Flayer, and then pass an insight check.
Why should I deny it?
Agree with Nisha to receive the Rapture buff. It grants a 1d6 bonus to your attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws until your next long rest. It is such a powerful buff that I plan my entire Act 3 around it. However, if you fail the insight check, you can use your Disguise Self spell and try again for the roll until you succeed. The Mirror of Loss. Okay, I'm gonna be real with you. I usually can't be bothered with this one, so this is going to be brief. If you pass the DC 20 religion check or DC 25 arcana check at the mirror, you'll be able to obtain +2 dexterity through dialogue. Essentially, you'll need to sacrifice a memory, which gives you a -2 to the relevant ability in order to gain a +2 increase to another stat of your choice. The only way to skip the initial check and guarantee the bonus is by reading the Necromancy of Fae and giving up the buff from that book. Whatever downsides you have obtained by giving up your memories can be mitigated with a scroll of Remove Curse. It's really just a cherry on top of our enormous power in Act 3, and I don't think it's required or worth the effort. But if you want to go for it and understand it better, I recommend looking it up in the wiki because it's pretty complex. Honourable mentions. Hey, it's kind of empty here. Honestly, there isn't really much else in Act 3 that adds anything to our build. I feel like I have to mention the Gaunter Mail here, just to address why it's not an honourable mention. The +3 to attack and damage is fine, but the chance to inflict a guiding bolt effect is basically useless as we have advantage all the time anyway. The only reason anyone would ever use it is for Celestial Haste, because fights are generally over before we have time to go lethargic. Celestial Haste is a long rest ability anyway, and we're never going to long rest. As a primary weapon, this thing is not even close to the Titanstring in damage. I can even prove it with math. On the topic of math, the only bow comparable to the Titanstring is the Vicious Short Bow, purchased from Abazigal after the Unholy Assassin questline, meaning this isn't even an option until very late game. This bow has the same passive effect as our daggers, Dolor Amarus, which adds 7 force damage if you manage to crit an enemy. Yes, they work with each other, and each critical you deal will add an additional 21 force damage. I like to call this setup the triple dollar, and it relies completely on your critting, which is very achievable through either surprise rounds or by having party members casting Hold Person and Hold Monster. The damage of the Vicious Short Bow is only comparable to the Titanstring with a Bloodlust Elixir, and I find it hilarious that it takes another whole action just to be close to the output of our Act 1 Forever Bow. The Armour of Agility is a perfect option for those doing a good playthrough who also do not want to be involved in becoming an unholy assassin. This armour rivals even the best heavy armors in the game because of our investment in dexterity. By this stage of the game, our modifier should be +5, meaning this armor brings us easily to 22 AC. In addition, if that isn't enough, you do have other options to increase that via gear or buffs. Although we won't stand and fight often if we're using the rest of the tools in our arsenal, we certainly can with this AC. We also get +2 to saving throws, and this armor does not impose disadvantage on stealth checks. We lose a a lot of damage output with this armor compared to the Bhaalist, but that doesn't make this build any less capable of carrying a more conventional playthrough. With the setup and gearing out of the way, let us begin the most complex and difficult topic of all, the Stealth Archer. A tale as old as time, not even Faerun is safe from this unseen menace. And no matter how many arrows pincushion the enemy, it always seems windy. A playstyle that can literally change BG3 from turn-based combat into a real-time action RPG. The Stealth Archer is a concept I've been refining for the community in the last 2 years since BG3's release. It is a very engaging, rewarding playstyle, and I truly enjoy how active it is. You will plan around enemy sightlines, react to enemy movements, and fire arrows without anyone noticing. It genuinely breaks the game at times, as you can have as many first turns as you want. With fast enough reactions and some mechanical understanding, you can cut down most of an encounter from range before it even starts. And depending on your dice rolls, you can attack almost infinitely from greater invisibility. Or for those who would rather not rely on luck, darkness completely breaks the game, also allowing infinite attacks, but more importantly, complete invincibility and a cheat code that breaks the AI in combat. This video assumes you have either watched the Stealth Archer build guide or have read the Undermountain build template, and will focus solely on the playstyle techniques that make this build concept work. So welcome to turn-based combat, but it's always your turn. The first step in the process of snowballing into an unstoppable death machine is buffs. There are a few to go through, but don't worry, we'll complete entire acts without long resting. Pop an elixir to get either 21 or 27 strength. This strength is incredibly powerful, and stacked on top of the gear we're going to pick up, it really makes the Titanstring's damage riders pop off, not to mention increasing your carry weight for all your essentials. Using the Drakethroat Glaive, purchased from Roa Moonglow after she moves to Moonrise Towers in Act 2, we will cast Draconic Elemental Weapon on our Titanstring, giving us a +1 bonus to our attack rolls and allowing our bow to deal an extra 1d4 damage with an element of our choice. That choice will depend on the synergy you have chosen for your archer, which I've outlined in Act 2 of the build guide. But briefly, here are a few examples. Cold damage for the Snowburst Ring and encrusted gear, making your enemy slip or become frozen. Or thunder damage of your gloves of Belligerent skies to prone your enemies with Reverberation. Next, Long Strider. 3 meters additional movement is a huge mobility boost during combat and perfect for setting up positioning or giving you enough distance to flee combat. And finally, Pass Without Trace. This gives a flat 10 bonus to all stealth checks, which will help you with out of combat attacking or staying hidden when you cross enemy sight lines. Both Long Strider and Pass Without Trace last until long rest, so you really can just cast them and forget for a while. Pass Without Trace is also a concentration, making it perfect for use for the strange Conduit ring, giving you 1d4 psychic damage for very little effort. The last thing we will go over is using the Shadeclinger Armour for advantage on saving throws. This one is an exploit, so only use it in your playthrough if you desire. It is not needed, but here in case if you want to leverage it. First of all, find an obscured area. You can confirm this by seeing the Clinging Shadows buff. Next, unequip or change to a different armor piece. Your Clinging Shadows buff will remain until your next long rest and stay on even if you are in broad daylight. Ending this section is my buff routine just before a fight. I throw an invis potion on the ground if I need an escape, and also a speed pot so I don't have to waste my bonus action. All you need to do is to walk into these surfaces to gain the benefits of the potions. If the boss is high armor class, I will use an Oil of Accuracy to give me +2 onto my attack rolls. Some examples of high AC bosses include Kefric, Raphael, and Ansar. If I want to run over an enemy, I will use Broodmother's Revenge instead, proccing it with a pre-fight small healing potion, or during the fight with a Raspberry. Do note that Broodmother's counts as a coating and will override any other active weapon coating. Another mention of weapon coatings that might be worth trying out: Jail Poison and Carabazan's Poison, both at DC 13 con save, and can completely disable anyone who fails. Whether sleeping or paralyzed, the character cannot move or act and automatically fails any strength or dexterity checks. The key takeaway for me, however, is that any attack within 3 meters of the target will be an automatic crit. Pass Without Trace and Greater Invisibility is one of the most broken combos in Baldur's Gate 3, allowing us to attack almost infinitely until we fail our stealth checks or run out of turn duration. Greater Invisibility scrolls start appearing at vendors at player level 5 and above, or if you're playing in a party, bards, sorcerers, archfey warlocks, wizards and Circle of the Land Druids that pick Underdark have access to the spell. We will learn Pass Without Trace at Ranger level 5, and the plus 10 to stealth checks really helps us pass our Greater Invisibility rolls. When using Greater Invis, the first stealth check DC is 15, then the following is 17, increasing by 1 per check. On honor mode, the check should go from DC 15 to 16, then 19, 24, 31, 40, and so on. At the time of recording the script, however, my combat log showed much more random DCs. With the stealth checks increasing in difficulty each time we attack, we will eventually fail. However, let's look at some things that improve our chances of success. We discussed Pass Without Trace giving us a plus 10. Following my Stealth Archer build guide, our equipment and proficiencies add to 23. If you have someone on your team with enhanced ability, you can use the Cat's Grace variant of the spell for advantage on dexterity checks. Yes, I've read your comments about halflings. Okay, they can't roll ones. Thank you. Before we move on, speaking of comments, I get a lot of questions asking how I concentrate on both Pass Without Trace and Greater Invisibility, as they're both concentration spells. If I'm playing solo, I will just pick one spell. In this case, I'm only using Greater Invisibility to get a head start on a boss. To concentrate on more than one spell, you'll need more than one character. That's where my support sorcerer comes in. With extended meta magic, we can double the duration with Greater Invisibility to 20 turns. Sneaking and enemy vision. How does it work? First of all, to see the enemy's vision, press and hold down the shift key. This red area denotes where the enemy can see, and as soon as you stick your foot onto the zone, you'll be spotted and enter combat. However, if you are sneaking, when you enter their sightlines, passing stealth checks can keep you out of initiative. Here are some techniques from my own experience that will help you trespass through these vision cones and manipulate positioning to your advantage. The easiest one is to just use invisibility, as the enemies cannot see you. But where's the fun in that? In this example, I showed my friend Elena how to get better positioning for the jailer fight by moving to the edge of the red zone, using a transposition arrow into this corner here to get her into prime position to take on the spectators and imps. You can also cut line of sight by using darkness. Using arrows with the darkness spell, you can completely remove vision and pass by unimpeded. Great for passing ambushes. Here in this clip, I know the guards are waiting for me behind this door, so I block vision with a darkness arrow, then open the door and eviscerate them under the cover of darkness. How am I seeing through darkness? Good question. Darkness is one of the most powerful tools you can use in your own playthrough. I have completely substituted my Greater Invisibility for Darkness because it is a lot more consistent and does not rely on increasingly difficult stealth rolls. By simply equipping the Eversight Ring, generating darkness, and using your bonus action to hide in the area, it will be impossible for enemies to find you unless they also have the ability to see in magical darkness. Let's go over some sources of darkness. Darkness arrows only last for 3 turns, but you can track the duration by hovering your cursor over the patch of darkness and pressing T to inspect. There are also plenty of darkness scrolls in the game which last for 10 turns, but remember that those are concentration. While in darkness, the enemy will be blinded, giving them disadvantage to hit you, which is great. However, hiding in darkness means they can't even begin to look for you. They will all skip their turns, giving you invulnerability. Hiding in darkness honestly might as well be cheating with how badly it breaks the AI. Darkness isn't perfect for the entire game. There are some enemies who have Devil Sight, which counters it, the most notable ones being Yu-Gi-Oh! And his Merrigans, the Warlock Captain of the Gift Yankee Ambush, the Imps in the House of Hope, and Raphael. Here's some examples of how to use darkness. In combat, if you just crouch, the enemy's AI will literally break and do nothing. This does not work if you just stand and end your turn in darkness. However, it might be useful to do so to make the enemy's position closer to you. you. Classes that have access to hide as a bonus action are Gloomstalker, Shadow Monk, and Rogues. Action economy is key in this game and is critical in a solo playthrough, which is where my preference for a bonus action hide comes from, to keep my actions for damage. Another slept on tech is the combo of Darkness Arrow and Transposition Arrows. Let me give you an example. Just entering Rivington, I shoot Arthur with a Darkness Arrow. This achieves two things. A, it puts him in a permanent state of rest, and B, it creates a blind spot where all my enemies are. I then use the Transposition Arrow to teleport to where his body is, grabbing 500 gold, a lower city pass, and most importantly, a pizza. I only discovered this combo recently, but I've been having a lot of fun blinking around from one patch of darkness to another. Other non-combat uses can involve setting up a pickpocket on a vendor in a very busy area with a lot of eyes. Try to position your cloud in such a way that it doesn't cover the vendor but can still hide you at the same time. I generally aim for the edge of the darkness as close as I can to my victim. Infinite first turns. This is not an exaggeration. We can manipulate combat so we can have as many first turns as we want. The reason we would even want to is it synergizes with our kit incredibly well, especially with Gloomstalker's additional attack on turn 1, which deals an extra 1d8 damage. One feature that many people do not place enough importance on with our beloved Gloomstalker is a +3 to initiative. When initiative rolls are determined using a d4, a +3 head start on a high dex class means easy and consistent control of the turn order time after time. Let's go over some techniques on how to set up the infinite first turn. The first method I use is Gloomstalker Hide. Hold shift to see the enemy's vision radius, then move outside of the red area. Outside of the enemy's vision, you can hide, but pay attention to what I'm about to say. The enemy will go and investigate your last known position. With this fact in mind, we want to manipulate the AI to our advantage. They will go the most direct path to where you were last seen and try to reveal you. If you're nowhere near this revealed area, combat will end, letting you reset or restart the encounter on your own terms. When the enemy runs to your last known position, they'll spin around on the spot trying to find you. This forces you to make a dexterity saving throw to avoid being revealed. Once you've passed the save and combat ends, you can help them pass to a better place. The second method is invisibility. For a cost of a bonus action, popping an invisibility potion and moving away from your last known position is a very effective way to abuse the AI. Like the previous example, the enemy will run to where you were last seen, spin around, and then try to detect your presence. This prompts a dex save from you, and as long as you can pass, combat will immediately end. This is incredibly synergistic with the Deathstalker Mantle, a cloak given to Dark Urge players. Once per turn, if the player manages to gain a kill with this item equipped, you gain invisibility for 2 turns. With the damage output of this belt, a kill per turn is more than achievable. You'll want to set aside some movement speed to get away from where you scored the kill and went invisible. Do note, if you have Call the Weak enabled, it's possible for the psychic damage to score the kill instead of you, preventing invisibility from triggering. Generally, this doesn't matter if you're relying on ending that turn with invisibility. You need to bear this in mind and toggle the ability off from the passives menu. And the last method I'll go over is just physically fleeing an encounter. As Gloomstalker, we have an extra 3 meters move speed at the start of combat. I highly recommend combining this with Enhanced Leap to cover incredible distances with just your bonus action. Just a quick mention that Enhanced Leap is a ritual spell, meaning it does not cost resources outside of combat. If you know you're going to start an encounter, it is a very good idea to cast this on yourself before engaging, as it lasts 10 turns. With our mobility, we can strike the enemy hard, bonus action dash, or enhanced leap past the 27-meter distance requirement, then flee combat. Then we can return back from camp to do this cycle all over again. Another tip that I can give you here is to target enemies that are closest to you, because once they are removed, the distance required to flee will update to the next closest enemy, giving you more space to work with. When you combine the infinite first turn technique with our assassin subclass, we can guarantee critical hits on every attack, setting up our first turn damage nova with some unbelievable damage rider interactions. How do you trigger surprise rounds for assassinate ambush crits? There are many ways, but before we go over them, let's set up some groundwork. Generally, if you engage the enemy within its vision radius, you will trigger a surprise round. I really want to emphasize the within part. As soon as you attack outside of this radius, it stops being consistent. With that in mind, here are some consistent methods I found personally, starting with the simplest one, going invisible and attacking within the enemy's vision range. Another method I find extremely consistent with this build is using bonus action abilities such as Hunter's Mark or any Illithid power, if you have the Awakens buff, that is. This is so consistent, I can guarantee a one-turn answer with this method every single time. How do you attack without getting into combat? I first discovered how Larian's game engine handles height relative to distance from their previous title, Divinity Original Sin 2. There, the ballistic shot ability dealt increased damage based on the distance it was fired from. But I realized you could use that height in that game to hyperextend your attack range far beyond the intended limit, letting you do some serious damage. Simply put, you could add height to your range to one-shot enemies without ever entering combat. Applying this principle to BG3, I found the mechanic worked in much the same way, which has allowed me to push the Stealth Archer concept as far as I have. A couple of years later, it's lovely to see this playstyle thrive in the community, but there are lots of little things I've learnt over that time that I can share here. The playstyle is very active and mechanical, which is enjoyable if you prefer a faster paced and reactive gameplay. The ceiling on this tech is quite high, but worth chasing if you do want to turn BG3 into an action RPG. Before we start on how to achieve out of combat attacking, let's go over the hotkeys, which you'll definitely need if you are to execute this efficiently. Holding down Shift allows you to see the enemy's vision cones in red. You'll plan your movements to avoid being in the zone at all costs. Holding down Control displays your attack range. This will update as you move, and the complexity will come from utilizing the max range of your attack combined with the movement of both your character and the enemy. And whilst holding down Control, you can left click to shoot. Using this technique, you can rapidly fire arrows. If you use Control click on a target outside of your displayed range, your character will move until they are in range in order to execute this attack command. You can interrupt this anytime by right-clicking. With these hotkeys in mind, let's practice them with the simplest out of combat attacking method. By using height, we can effectively extend our attack range with our bow beyond the point where an enemy would typically react to you and draw you into combat. I know the perfect spot to practice out of combat attacking. Follow me to the Grand Mausoleum waypoint in Act 2. This is my favorite fishing spot and I'd love to share it with you. Here I use the fire arrow to reveal the Kuo-toa. I view my range of control and then left click to send an arrow flying. Since we're up so high, the enemy does not know what to do, allowing you to enjoy target practice to your heart's content. There are many areas in the game where you can employ this technique, but I'll leave you with a couple of ideas here. Clearing the cash guards and steel watches off the dogs from the counting house roof is super fun. Also, the rooftops of the lower city are a vibe for picking off the flaming fists for easy experience. The next out of combat method is using the max range on your attack. By only attacking using the extremities of your range, you will not get pulled into combat. However, you will be presented with two problems when doing this. Firstly, attacking at max range will impose disadvantage on your attack rolls, which means you'll miss a lot unless you optimize to counter poor hit rate. If you followed my guide, the risky ring will do a lot of the heavier lifting here, offsetting that disadvantage to just a neutral roll. Other important factors in our hit rate include Archery fighting style for a +2, Draconic Elemental Weapon for a +1, and a high dexterity stat for up to a +5. The second problem we're presented with in this unintended playstyle is the enemy reacting in real time to becoming a pincushion for your arrows. They will run around trying to look for you. You should react immediately and start moving out of range. Holding shift to assist you in keeping track of enemy sightlines as they run around trying to find you. Do you see these white spotlights on the ground there? They denote note your last known location and will be where the enemy will go looking for you. Use this to your advantage, as their movement will become quite predictable once you get the hang of it. What you want to do is reposition again, using control to see the boundary of your attack range. Repeat this as many times as you want. Do note, if you ever cross the enemy's sideline, you will enter combat. So in summary, control and left click to rapidly shoot an enemy at max range. If they react, hold shift to see what they're doing and move away from their sight. Practice makes perfect, and do have fun with it. That's not the only out of combat attacking you can do. Other methods include use of greater invisibility, quite effective at softening up the boss for your party, and lastly, the most effortless of them all, usage of darkness. Literally just stand in your own cloud and start shooting. Aura of Murder. The Bhaalist Armour emits an aura that gives everyone in it piercing vulnerability, doubling the damage they take from piercing weapons, which is the damage type of our Titanstring. This aura triggers within 2 meters, and you can double check this by looking at the enemy status or description. However, this presents us with a problem. We want to deal incredible damage, but we have to get up close to our enemies with our ranged weapon, which should impose disadvantage. Luckily, there is a sweet spot that you can stand where we don't get disadvantage on our attack roll. See how it says enemy too close? But if I move over here, I have the advantage from my risky ring and can still apply the aura. This will work on the majority of enemies. However, Answer has a pretty big janky hitbox where you are threatened within the Aura of Murder range. So that leaves us with figuring out an alternative. If I'm playing solo, I honestly just rely on my hit rate. However, if you're playing in a party, you can just give the Bhaalist Armour to an ally and have them get up close and personal to the enemy to apply the aura instead. Damage riding. I've mentioned damage riders a few times, but what does that actually mean? To put it as simply as possible, some sources of damage can be applied multiple times in a single attack. This is a much larger topic, which is outside the scope of this video, but I will explain as clearly as possible the mechanics that are relevant. In Act 1, the damage riders you're relying on are Titan Weapon and Special Arrows. The Titan Weapon feature adds a strength modifier to your weapon damage. When you use a special arrow, your strength modifier applies again to that arrow's damage. This is going to remain the case for the entire game, but as we progress, we're only going to add to this concept in order to snowball our damage to insane levels. At level 6, you start to find arrow mini targets sold by vendors. These bounce from the initial target to multiple others in range, dealing half weapon damage on each bounce. Each hit also adds a strength modifier, offsetting the fact they do half damage. More importantly, if your first hit is a crit, then every bounce will also be a critical. Late game, Craterflesh Dolor Riding. In Act 3, when we pick up the Craterflesh Gloves, we start to see some crazy damage from riders using the same mechanics we've been working with the whole game. That arrow did 253 damage. How did we arrive at that total? Let's break down the interactions. First, the damage from the attack, as you would expect. Weapon damage being 2d8 for a slaying arrow, 14. Enchanted weapon +1. Dexterity modifier +5. Sharpshooter +10. Cloud giant +8. Adulters 7 +7 for 14. Totaling 52. And with the Bhaalist vulnerability, we double it to 104. And -4 from Great Worm Scale on Answer for a total of 100. But as you can see here in the log, we now have more than 2 entries for damage from just one attack. So what's happening here? Well, we've looked at the first entry, but the second looks very similar. The slaying arrows deal double damage against their intended target. They do this by utilizing the Titan weapon feature, like any other special arrow would, riding your strength and your dex modifiers to increase its damage. However, in this case, all of the weapon damage is doubled, meaning the total initial attack damage happens twice. So the second entry in our log breaks down the exact same way as before. Weapon damage, 2d8 for a slaying arrow, 13. Enchanted weapon, +1. Dex modifier, +5. Sharpshooter, +10. Cloud giant, +8. Dollars, 7 +7. Totaling 51. We double it with the Bhaalist vulnerability, equals 102, and take away 4 from Answer's Great Worm Scales for a total of 98. For what are these instances of force damage? These are from the Craterflesh Gloves, and they only trigger on a critical hit. They should deal 1d6 force damage, but since they're being treated as critical damage themselves, they're dealing 2d6 instead. So the first instance we're seeing is because of the first instance of weapon damage, and what we're seeing here is force damage 2d6 for 10, Dollars 7 plus 7 for 14, Cloud Giant plus 8, 32 minus 4 for a total of 28. But the second instance of Craterflesh applies because of the second instance of weapon damage and breaks down in the same way. Force damage 2d6 for 9, double dollars for 14, Cloud Giant plus 8, 31 minus 4, totaling 27. Okay, to summarize, we had 2 instances of double force damage from Craterflesh, 4 instances of Cloud Giant strength from Titan weapon, and 8 instances of Dolor Amarus from our pair of daggers. To cap this all off, the Bhaalist Armour doubles the piercing damage, which is all of the damage included in both instances of weapon damage. Before I leave you, sweethearts, let me give you some practical in-game examples of a turn-based combat loop. If you need more of a walkthrough, check out my live streams or videos on my channel. Anyways, for Act 1, let's use this ogre fight as an example. If you're playing solo, you should cast Enhanced Leap out of combat whenever you expect to fight. I then Nova this bugbear, and then I'm left with the ogre. I know she hits pretty hard, so I use my bonus action to leap onto the roof here and use the building to block her line of sight, giving me cover. By being on the roof, I have a +2 high ground bonus, giving me a massive boost to my hit rate. If you don't have use of cover, you can use the Enhanced Leap to create a huge gap between you and your foe, forcing them to waste their action on a dash, giving you a safe turn from being attacked. For Act 2, the mid-game, let's use Kefrik as an example. He has high AC, so I pre-coat my bow with an oil of accuracy to counter that. I also want to reach him on turn 1, so I drink a fly potion and a speed pot. After the cutscene, I fly onto the pillar for an extra +2 onto my attack roll. I select a nice arrow and shoot it at him, causing the strength modifier to double dip from the Titanstring and forcing the old man to also make a saving throw against falling prone. I will fire all my arrows apart from one and assess the situation. If I do not cutscene him turn 1, I will then use one darkness arrow where I'm standing to hide in. For Act 3, let's use an enemy who will test our damage output. Answer. He has very high AC and will threaten us with his gigantic hitbox. So Oil of Accuracy will be our answer. Pun not intended, by the way. I go invisible and use my bonus action ability, Concentrated Blast, to trigger a surprise round. I use Concentrated Blast here because it cannot miss, which is the key to triggering the surprise round with 100% consistency. I know I will crit as an assassin on a surprise round, so the next thought I have is how to do the most damage on this Nova round. First, I have to set up the Aura of Murder for piercing vulnerability by positioning close enough that I can see the status effect on answer. In this example, I'll go all out for content purposes, so I will action surge, use a speed potion, and consume Terrazul for incredible action economy. Yes, I do have 4 action points with 1 character. Since the answer is an undead dragon, I will use an undead slaying arrow to add yet another damage rider source and increase my damage output even further. If you're missing the achievement to shoot a dragon out of the sky, my build can consistently do this damage in a single turn. Do keep in mind, we still have action economy left, and this was a surprise round, meaning we actually had another turn for free after this round. Thank you so much for watching my Stealth Archer video. It is my baby darling, and I love seeing the community have fun with this concept. Do let me know in the comments how you get on with this incredible build. And as always, I couldn't do this without my amazing Patreon sweeties and channel members. You all keep me going, and your support means the world to me.